All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And I'd like to welcome you to the Coeur d'Alene School District Special Board Workshop for September 21st, 2020. Before we get going, I'll just introduce our participants up front here. Starting on my far right is Miss Rebecca Smith, board member, and then Miss Lisa May, board member. Behind them is Lynn Town, our board clerk. To my left is Jen Brumley, our vice chair, and Tambra Pickford, board member. And to Tambra's left is Dr. Steve Cook, our superintendent. No public comments scheduled to be taken at this meeting, but as always, comments may be submitted in writing to the board through our clerk. Is there a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. And then we had a consent agenda item on here. Dr. Cook, did you want to mention that at all?
Yeah, I think it's worthy of mentioning, Chair Morrissey. Rowe. This document, if you recall, the federal government categorized folks working in the field of education, K-16 or maybe even K-20, as critical infrastructure. And so one of the things that we've done with that is taken to some extent to build a task for reentry of folks, which for asymptomatic folks who have been potentially exposed to the COVID virus, if they exhibit no symptoms and can produce a negative test result within the window of time that's most opportune for testing for COVID, which is between the 5th and the 8th day. We recommended choosing the 6th day of exposure, and after staff receive a negative test, we can actually bring them back to work, and this would be the process to facilitate that, and this would be the document and the guidelines on how we would administer that into the system for your guys' consideration today.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Dr. Cook on that? Okay, so is there a motion to approve consent agenda item A?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, Ms. Town. Okay. And then that brings us to our info action item for today. It's a reason we're here. We've been talking about this for several weeks, this meeting. Before I turn it over to Dr. Cook, I just kind of remind the process that we've gone through and where we're at. As you all know, and hopefully the folks in the public know, we've over the course of the summer, Dr. Cook and his team worked on our reopening plan and also data that would be associated with that for the different categorical levels. On August 17th, we approved as a board to open in the orange for the start of the school year. On August 24th, we approved the reopening plan. And also on August 24th, we saw a draft language of a resolution that would allow us to change, or that we'd use as a vehicle for changing the category in the future. And then that language was approved on August 31st. And then I believe at a meeting on September 2nd, we set this meeting as a kind of our first look as far as looking at a categorical change. That is the purpose of today's meeting. So with that, Dr. Cook, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Morrissey. Rowe. As you all know, we are currently in our orange category, which is the hybrid model in which half of our students come to school on Monday, Tuesday, the other half of our students come on Thursday, Friday, and everybody is participating in virtual learning the other 3 days of the week. That decision was made, I think, on August 17th, and on that day, we kind of established this 4-week window to come discuss what that next step might look like, and here we are. And so if you recall, the 3 data points that we monitor pretty explicitly are case incidence rates, a 7-day rolling average of case incidence rates, the percent positivity on tests also in a 7-day rolling average, and then the rate of hospitalization and specifically also rate of ICU admittance during that window of time too. And so we've got in front of you some data on all three of those data points that kind of give you the general trends on what that's been going like since we've been collecting that data and monitoring that data. And we have, I would remind us that we have built that model in accordance with both the CDC guidelines and the Panhandle Health District guidance. And we have available for you today on Zoom, we have both Panhandle Health District on, I think Director Laura Whalen and epidemiologist Jeff Lee are both available from them. And we also have representation from Kootenai Health to answer any of your questions about hospitalizations and their response in the current window of time frame. And so at this point, I would just turn it over to you guys to discuss and ask questions either of our team and or either of those representatives from Panhandle Health District and Kootenai Health.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cook. Why don't we go ahead and open it up for questions that anyone has regarding the data or for those folks that Dr. Cook mentioned online.
I'd like to see if we could get an update from Panhandle, if we have them on Zoom, just to kind of get their sense of how we're doing as a community, where we've come, where we're headed, when they think we might expect to see, if we're going to see a bump from Labor Day and schools opening.
Director Morrissey, Chairman Morrissey. This is Laura.
Hi, Laura, go ahead.
Good morning. I have with me Jeff Lee today, and I think he's prepared to share his screen. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah, give me a second.
All right. And on that screen, he'll just show you some of the more recent data, 7-day rolling average that we've got going on, as well as address positivity. And regarding the question pertaining to new cases associated with Labor Day, I think I hear a bit of an echo. We are seeing, as I'm sure you've all noted, a small uptick, not a huge uptick at this point. And we're also seeing some cases associated with schools in the different counties. Jeff, I'll let you take it from here.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Good afternoon. This is the latest rolling 7-day average for the incidence rates per 100,000 by county. As you can see, Kootenai County, which is the gold color that I'm pointing to here, is running right around 11 cases per 100,000, which puts it into the yellow category, or minimum by our category names. And all of the others are also in the minimal category. Benoit County's taken a little step up, but that doesn't take much for that to occur because of their population size. So at this time, and Kootenai County has been pretty stable in this yellow or minimal category for 2 weeks. To just add on to what Ms. Whalen was saying, we are starting to see a trend of increase in the number of cases being reported. This has been occurring over the last 2 to 3 weeks that they've been going up. We've not seen a significant change in our age distributions, and I'll scroll down to show the overall age distributions. Okay, here we go. What you're looking at is, this is the aggregate for the district, broken down by 5-year periods. So this would be 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, and so on. If you notice, right now, the 5 to 19-year-olds are accounting for about 11%. I'm sorry, 9% of all the cases. And this has not changed very significantly in the last couple weeks, but we are watching that for any changes in that age group. The 20 to 30-year-olds account for 21% of all the cases. And that age group is really, as you can see by the columns off to the side, that the 20 to 25-year-old age group is the largest age population amongst all of our cases, followed by the 25 to 30-year-olds. So what we're looking at is we're not seeing a significant increase in the children, but we are seeing an increase in the category of where some of your teachers would be in the 20 to 30 year age group. So that would be something to keep an eye on as you're transitioning from orange to yellow or remaining in orange or whatever the decision is that you want to do. Any questions so far?
No, it doesn't look like it. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So coming back up. Again, this is our moving average, and this is how we're currently, along with our positivity rates, which as of last week, the positivity rate for our entire district was 5.8%. That's an increase from 4.3% in the 2 weeks prior, but not nearly as high as we were mid-July when we were nearly at 13% positivity. And so that everybody understands what I'm talking about, the positivity rate refers to the proportion of all tests that return positive from all the different sources of testing where we get both positive and negative results. The state provides us with these positivity numbers. They have taken the data that is in our reporting system and cleaned it to ensure that any labs that are providing positives must also be providing all of the negative test results so that we have a valid denominator for determining positivity. So right now we're just under 6% positivity as of the end of the week.
Jeff, can I ask you a quick
Questions of
question
that?
about that positivity? Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
And then
So the quick question.
Go ahead.
In our packet, we have Kootenai Health's positivity rate, and I know Kootenai Health doesn't include your data in their reporting, but do you include Kootenai Health's data in your reporting? So does that 5.8% include Kootenai Health's positive test results and negative test results?
yes.
Jeff, could I just take that real quick?
Yes, ma'am.
And hand it right back to you. Certainly the data we have is a little bit behind the data that Kootenai Health reports. Kootenai Health does report their data to the state, and what we're reporting here is state.
Great, thank you.
Correct. It's developed by the state, and they're looking at much more than just Kootenai Health's testing capacity. It's a much more accurate picture of what's going on district-wide. As of last week, we calculated Kootenai Health's 7-day average for positivity to be right around 3.7%.
They are at 8.2 today, or most recently, excluding pre-procedural. Not an average. I think this is, and certainly our Kootenai Health person is online or on the webinar and can speak to that better.
Hi, this is John Weinsheim from Kootenai Health. So our current rolling 7-day positive percentage is 8.3%. I mean, I actually have the dashboard up right now. So, and so that's, as the district points out, this is just the testing that we're doing. So, so we have a number of different tests with pre-procedural and not, and then we have our 2207 site average, 7-day rolling average as well. But from the system standpoint, that report from this morning was 8.2%, and right now it's ticked up. We've gotten some more results. We're about 8.3%. So. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, thank you, John.
So
Appreciate
John,
it.
this is
Sorry.
Rebecca Smith. John, just so I'm clear, is that 8.3% that's today, is that up or down from last week?
That is slightly up from last week.
And then slightly up from the week before?
Yeah, I'm looking at the overall trend. I have Elizabeth Brewer on from our team as well. I can't see the 2 weeks prior to this, Elizabeth.
Hi, this is Elizabeth. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. I would say yes, over the last several successive weeks, we've seen our positivity rate just through our Kootenai Health testing increase slightly week over week.
Dr. Cook, that data that someone just threw up on the board there, that's in our packet, that's the Kootenai Health data that we receive, is that correct? Or is
That's
that
correct.
the Panhandle data?
It's the Kootenai Health data, but we get it from Panhandle Health District as a public health agency, so that pass-through goes, I guess, according to procedure.
Okay. Any other questions for John or Elizabeth? Why we have them up?
Yeah, maybe you guys could just speak to us overall how your hospital capacity. It seems like in the paper there's a dashboard that we follow, and it seems like hospitalizations are stabilizing or down. Is that correct? Or maybe you could just speak overall how Kootenai Health is doing.
Yeah. So actually, the last couple of weeks it has been rising, sort of incrementally. So we are definitely higher from an inpatient standpoint today. So we have 20 current inpatients and have 7 in critical care. So I think our inpatient volume last week was roughly about 14 patients in the house, and now we have 20. That's not enough to be, that time period is not enough to be a trend, but the number is definitely higher. So.
If it's not a trend, could you speak to maybe what might be the causal factor for seeing the numbers on the increase again for hospitalizations?
No, I mean, too early for me to estimate. And I can tell you that we have seen a slight increase in orders to the testing site. So we're following both things to see whether we're having, a greater prevalence of testing from a symptomatic standpoint. So that's gone up slightly, but it's, I guess by comparison, nowhere near where we had been in July and even August. So, this number we had to, I think our high this past week was 200 tests at the 2207 site, and we had been as high as 500 nearly at one point. So, but we're definitely keeping an eye on it. Obviously, that number, that's a lot of inpatients, but I don't know that we have an understanding quite yet of a sort of causal factor for why that number has gone up.
Also, do you think you could speak a little bit, and Panhandle might want to jump in because they do a lion's share of the testing in our community. Now that the CDC has changed their recommendations as far as testing for asymptomatic people with known exposures, do you anticipate that will potentially increase your volumes? And did you see a change from August 25th when the CDC changed it to no testing for asymptomatic exposures?
And Jeff, I'll certainly let you jump in, but let me start off. Certainly, the CDC's guidance has been clarified. I mean, when they came out a couple of weeks ago with not testing asymptomatic close contacts, it was dependent upon what the picture was, what public health thought the picture was. And so we actually didn't really change our recommendations if the story was that they were truly a close contact. So I really, it is confusing, I know. Often CDC can put out confusing guidance. But it's a matter of sitting down and working with the epidemiologists and looking where we're at and what our contact investigators and tracers are recommending to the folks. Jeff, what would you add to that?
No, that was exactly right. At the time that the previous recommendations came out, we had a discussion with our folks at the state level, and we made the decision that it was in the best interest of our communities for us to continue to test asymptomatic people with significant exposure to known positive cases of COVID. So nothing there really changed for us over this time period, nor is it going to change now. We have been testing or recommending testing for individuals who have been exposed to COVID-19, regardless of their presenting symptoms or lack of them.
Yeah, and I guess
one
on
more
that
point
end,
to clarify, if I might, Mr. Chairman, is that it's Kootenai Health that's been the hero in testing. We're the voice to the folks talking to them about testing, but Kootenai Health is truly the testing champion in Kootenai County.
and just to clarify that further, I know we had our first exposure last week at a facility, and so guidance for us moving forward, if we have a teacher or a student who tests positive in the classroom, what will the guidance be? If we're in full capacity, student shoulder to shoulder, will we use the same 6 feet within longer than 15 minutes, and we'll be asking all of those students to be tested, or what guidance will you give on those scenarios?
Jeff, I'll let you respond to that, please.
The guidance is actually going to be your requirements that you should have in your plan. Our recommendation is that any students that test positive are immediately, well, if they become symptomatic, they should be sent home until they've got a test. And if they're positive, they need to remain home until they are no longer considered contagious, which for most of the population is going to be 10 days from the onset date of their symptoms. If they're asymptomatic and they were tested as a contact and were subsequently positive, it is 10 days from the date of the test. Any of their close contacts would then need to be sent home for the 14-day quarantine period, as well as any in-home contacts that may be attending other schools.
Right, and I guess the clarification I'm looking for is, are those that are sent home or asked to quarantine, do they need to be tested?
Certainly, if they are being quarantined as having significant contact, we would recommend that they discuss with their physician about getting tested, even if they're asymptomatic. But we do, with asymptomatic individuals, we do recommend that they wait at least 5 to 8 days after the contact, the known exposure, to minimize the likelihood of getting a false negative test.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, any other questions on the data that we had in our board packet that's on our district website or that's been shared with us today?
I think I just have one more question for Jeff. Jeff, you do projections, and I guess I'd like to understand maybe what kind of projections you might have as we look ahead the next couple weeks, and what kind of insight you might give us as we look from this point forward. I know you don't have a magic ball, but if you could give us some insight, that would be helpful to me. Thanks.
Okay, with a caveat at the very beginning. We haven't been doing any modeling for future projections over the past couple weeks, so I don't have anything current. The last model that we had was indicating that we were within the confidence intervals for two national models that are being used, the Johns Hopkins model and the Columbia University model. Two things have occurred that so that we haven't been updating that particular model. One is our person that was doing the modeling for us took a job in another state, and we are looking at developing a local model based more on our demographics and activity, and that does take a little bit of time to put that together. So we're in between models right now, but if you ask me my gut feeling, couple things that I'm concerned about is we are moving very quickly into flu season, and there are no rules that say you can't have both flu and COVID-19. Hopefully, any of the interventions that we have and are continuing to use, such as social distancing and masking, will help to reduce transmission of both of those. But people could end up having both flu and COVID-19, as well as something else like respiratory syncytial virus, which could make them very, very sick, especially the more at-risk population. And I know there's been concern. I've had communication each year from school nurses who have students who have immunity problems, and they're very concerned about that during flu season. So I imagine that'll be even more so this particular flu season with COVID still circulating in our communities.
I think I turned that on. Hi, I have a question for Laura. Laura, I know that Panhandle Health moved us as a community into yellow a couple weeks back, and there seems to be some questions about the need for masks as we've moved into yellow, and certainly the contemplation today is moving schools into the yellow phase. And so I just would like to hear from you on whether masking needs to be a continued priority.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we've spoken in the past, there's only certain mitigation strategies that we have available to us. And the more data that comes out about masking, it seems to be working as a non-pharmaceutical intervention. I am a believer in whatever we can do to get children back to school. Let's do it. And if masking is going to prevent, as the data seems to be leaning towards, the spread or the severity of this illness, then I'm a believer in masking. Certainly, it's your decision as a school board, and I will support your decision as a school board. But if you look at the literature that's out there, it clearly points to masking being an effective non-pharmaceutical intervention. Jeff, anything to add there?
No, ma'am. I think you hit the nail on the head. Until we have more tools in our toolbox, and it's really difficult to say when that might be, We should use the tools that we have currently as best we can. We haven't lowered the transmission rate all the way to where I would be comfortable discontinuing mask use. It doesn't take very long to ramp back up if we don't stop the spread, or at least slow it down significantly until we have other tools in our toolbox.
Thank you, Jeff and Laura.
Okay, is that it for questions for those folks in regarding the data?
I guess I'd just like to draw attention to, I was just kind of reviewing my notes after getting an update from Kootenai Health and Panhandle. And one thing that just caught my eye is I was looking at the data that was presented in our packet. And Kootenai's numbers today, 20 inpatients and 7 critical, is a change, and it's a change on our metrics. And so I think we should note it publicly today that those numbers put us in a moderate and orange level, and we didn't have that data previously in our packet. So just wanted to draw attention to that.
Well, the only thing I would say is with the metric I'm looking at, 20 still leaves us in minimal for hospitalizations, but 7 is the first number in the moderate critical care.
I'm looking at modern, it says 21 to 32 for hospitalizations.
Right.
And did Coot? Wow. Close. My mic is on, yes. Yeah.
My mic was not on. I apologize.
Well, let's clarify. Critical moves us to moderate, and hospitalizations were within 1 of being in a critical, and I think it's been a dramatic jump from where they were. And so I just wanted to make note of that so we can be aware.
Okay. So I think we've asked our questions in regards to the data. The question before us today is, given the data, are we looking to move our categorical change? And so if there's questions around that, I would like to kind of move the discussion to that, or if individual trustees are ready to share their thoughts. Let's do that.
I just had a few questions for Dr. Cook and the administration about some of the feedback that we have received. First, I want to thank the staff and the community that have reached out and given us their input prior to this meeting. There was a couple of issues that were brought up about class size at a secondary level, and I had the opportunity to walk many of the facilities this past week, and I want to say a big shout out to every staff member there. It looked phenomenal. They were doing a great job. Students looked happy. Teachers were thrilled to have their students back in the classroom, so I first wanted to acknowledge all of their hard work. But then segue mostly to the secondary and some concern that we've heard about class sizes, and wanted to know if we could just get an update from the administration on class sizes, and if we choose to move to yellow, what will our class sizes look like, and is there any plan to address some of the concerns that we heard in parent feedback and teacher feedback?
Yeah, so as you know, if we go to yellow, the hybrid model goes out and all students come into school 5 days a week. And that would mean that the kids that are in the class are all there present. We would spread them out as much as we can, but as you know, that wouldn't be a 6 feet minimum. We would just be spreading them out as much as possible. And there are definitely, this class size is something we've, as a large district and as a drawing district in the region, we tend to have class sizes that can be large. And so at this point, since I've been here, we've had classes that can go into the 30s at the secondary level. And I think one of the things I would suggest that we could run some numbers and just look at some analysis on this, but we didn't take on reducing class sizes in a period of time in which we've had quite a bit of money cut from our budget due to kind of concerns from the state level. And so reducing class sizes, as you know, is a very expensive endeavor. And so I think that's part of what we would be balancing. But I'd be glad to run some numbers for you and see how they compare to last year.
And I think what I was hearing from parents and from staff and some of the communication was that they could maybe support moving to 5 days a week, but with the burden of students being in 900 square foot classrooms, 35 to 40 students, that made them uncomfortable. And I think that was a fair concern. And so I guess I'm thinking, do we want to say, is there a certain number of students that can be in a class at one time? Or can we utilize our larger classrooms for our bigger classes or multi-purpose rooms? Or is there a way that we could provide comfort for teachers and parents knowing that potentially not all our class sizes are large, but we do have a few, in the next week? Can we consider that and hear some recommendations from the district?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two parts to that question. The first one is, what's the rate of students per teacher? And I think that first of all that's what when I referenced the fact that that's an expensive endeavor that we would have to address specifically with budgetary funds. That's going to be an issue that's going to take resources. And then the second one would be to potentially move classrooms around, which isn't necessarily, it's not impossible, but it's definitely difficult if we start moving classrooms around. And most of the classes at any given school are all the same size. The standard class in our district is about 900 square feet. And so, you're going to have some classes that are smaller, some that are bigger, and I think that's the next step would be, is if this board desires to see what that data looks like, is for us to produce that data, and then we can figure it out from there.
One thing I found regarding that, we heard from a lot of teachers, and we were all in buildings last week, talked to a lot of teachers. And a lot of the concern I heard about Yellow was, well, how are we going to social distance? And we can't maintain 6 feet and those sorts of things. And what I found is there was maybe a lack of understanding of our plan. It's a robust plan, it's a deep plan, and a lot of them didn't realize that in a Yellow category, social distancing isn't required like we have it in orange. And when you talked about that some of their anxiety was relieved, because a lot of their anxiety was, how am I going to social distance this class of 30 when it's probably not possible in 900 square feet, or it's not possible. So I don't know. That was just with several people that I talked to, that was some of their anxiety. Now I realize there's other anxiety like, wow, this is a lot of people in the classroom, and that was a different maybe subset of people we heard from. But I think some of it's just, our teachers, there's a lot we ask them to do to get school started, and they've been focused on orange and what does orange mean. And I know they haven't looked at green, they haven't looked at yellow, they haven't looked at red in the depth that they have orange. And so there's just some, at least from what I heard, some lack of understanding of what it meant to be in yellow.
I do fear, though, the CDC's change and recommendations today, and then the retraction of their change, is going to amplify fears for staff and for families, now that we have confusion at a national level about what constitutes transmission and how can we mitigate the risk. And so the guidelines that came out on Friday specifically mentioned 6 feet and the aerosolization of the virus, and that is a risk. And so they've retracted that for today, but I think we'll see more in the next or in the weeks to come. And I think it's something that we must consider. We approved our plan based on CDC recommendations. And so if they are going to move forward and adapt these recommendations, then our plan should also absorb changes, and we should, be up to date with what the CDC is recommending. So I think there will be more to come on that, but I think we will hear from families about those changes and what does it mean for crowded classrooms.
And I would just like to add that when we built the plan, we built a plan that was based upon risk, and the higher the risk, when there's more transmission in the community, then our mitigation strategies were going to be more intensive. And I think the question now is whether or not we feel like we're at a threshold where the risk is low enough that we can back off. Hence in orange, if you recall, 6 feet is a minimum standard. And in yellow, we're saying we believe the risk is low enough now that 6 feet no longer becomes the prerequisite, that we're kind of doing that trade-off, if you will, by, I think, some of the other non-pharmaceutical interventions, as we asked with Laura, that masking potentially could be seen as a strategy that can be positive and productive in that environment. And so I think that's the part of the plan, and we're always welcome to review the plan if you guys would like, but I would recognize that the plan was built upon mitigating risk.
Dr. Cook, one quick question that I have is could you give us an update on just kind of what's going on in our schools regarding students that are staying home because of exposures? I know one of our schools had a direct exposure, but I know other students are at home, and just give us an update on where we're at with that.
Of course, I'm glad to. So right now, we've had one exposure event that's happened at a school, and currently, I think there are 24 total individuals that are on quarantine in that, and that one, we reported that publicly last week. Additionally, we have quite a few more staff that have been, we call them one-offs, if you will, that either are exposed, staff or students that have been exposed through home events, something that is unaffiliated with the school. And I think I'll have to get back with you on that data, but I think there's somewhere in the case of 30 or 40 of those across the district in which students or staff members have been asked to monitor their symptoms or been asked to quarantine or are pending or at home waiting test results. But right now, the only one event that we've had that was at Skyway a couple weeks ago is the one event that we've seen so far in the district.
So I just want to share kind of what I've come from today. I think the numbers in our packet that we received on Friday are different than the numbers I heard today. And so so correct me if you're hearing different than what I'm hearing. So I heard Panhandle Health through Jeff say that we are at a 5.8 positivity rate. But then I also heard Laura indicate an 8.2 positivity rate, which was also mimicked by John at Kootenai Health with a 8.2 and maybe even an 8.3 today. So while Jeff's information and he indicated it is somewhat behind Kootenai Health today is squarely putting us in orange with the positivity rate they have shared today. In addition, I heard we have 20 hospitalizations as of today, which puts us right on the bubble between yellow and orange, and we have 7 in critical care, which puts us into the orange category. And then our only other metric, so just to restate, the metrics that we have agreed to use are, as far as hospitalization and critical care, those are 2 different numbers, and what I see right now is we're squarely orange and on the bubble of yellow with those 2. We use positivity rate, which based on the most current numbers from Kootenai Health puts us in orange, but Panhandle Health puts us in yellow. And I don't know, maybe Jeff can clarify that a little bit too as to why he indicated a 5.8, but we're getting a very different number from Kootenai Health. And then our only other measure is cases per 100,000. And we've definitely been trending right square in the middle of yellow at 8.5. And so I really struggle today because I see everything in yellow up until today. I hear numbers that have put us into orange. I guess the most difficult commentary I struggle with today is both Kootenai Health and Panhandle have indicated trending up over the last few weeks. And I think that's consistent with the numbers we have in front of us. There hasn't been a trend down since mid-August, or late August, I should say, from September over the last 3 weeks. Not significant, and I even heard John say that, slightly. Even Elizabeth said slight increases week over week. So my struggle is being on the bubble and knowing we're 1 week into the school year and we have some yellow categories, and one that's divided and one that's squarely in orange. I just don't know, frankly, what to do today. I'm really, really struggling. I came into this with a plan. With the statistics I had, and I appreciate so much Panhandle and Kootenai Health being here because these are not easy decisions, and this is a really critical time for our community, in my opinion, with the impacts that opening up schools are going to have. And so if anybody wants to help me make that decision from Kootenai Health or Panhandle, please weigh in on this and tell me when you see these numbers that we're on the bubble and in between these. If you've got some advice, I'd love to hear it.
You just said exactly my thoughts sitting in here, reading over what we had in our packet and then also being in some of the schools this week and getting emails from staff and having conversations with staff, and then coming here and looking at these numbers, I would also echo Jen's what she just said, and would love to hear from Jeff as well. Do we still have him?
Yes, ma'am, I'm still here. So the 5.8 that I'm referring to is based on data from our reporting to the state and the federal government through the National Electronic Disease Surveillance System. It includes more than Kootenai Health and their testing. It includes any tests that are submitted to national labs that report through our electronic lab reporting. Because it's a broader pool of testing, those numbers, it would not surprise me that those numbers vary specifically from Kootenai Health's testing.
Jeff, can I interrupt real quick? Is it Kootenai County data, or does that 5.8 include our other local?
Yeah, it's aggregated at the district level. This is district-wide, so that's the other reason why it will vary from Kootenai Health's data.
Can I clarify that he's talking about Panhandle Health District, not Coeur d'Alene
School
School?
district. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Thank you, Dr. Cook. This would be for the 5 northern counties.
So is it fair to say then Kootenai County's data or positivity rate number is more reflective of what we're seeing in our community as an actual positivity rate, or would you recommend taking in all 5 northern counties? Because I think that's the difference, and it is confusing, and I think we do need some direction. It seems to me that Kootenai Health's data, since they're testing locally primarily, and maybe they can speak to this, which number gives us the best idea of what a true accurate positivity rate is in our community?
This is Laura. I'll weigh in before Dr. Weinheim. So certainly, Kootenai Health does the bulk of the testing in the 5 northern counties. Our other testers are Heritage has implemented a testing strategy, and they're testing probably maybe, if you look at their all of their sites, which include 3 in Kootenai County and 1 in Shoshone County, they're testing probably 600 to 800 people, depending on the week. And their positivity rate, as you might imagine, is a tad bit higher than Kootenai Health's. And Bonner Hospital, Bonner General, is doing some testing. They're probably averaging 40, 50 tests a week, not as many. Boundary Community Hospital has an Abbott ID machine, and they're doing a very small amount of testing. Mariman Health in Benewah County is actually doing quite a bit of testing. They too have an Abbott ID, but they are doing quite a bit of testing. I don't get their reports on a regular basis, so I can't give you those numbers. As well as Shoshone Medical Center has an Abbott ID, where they're doing a small amount of testing. So, and then there's those that we're not aware of, but the state will receive those results only if the submitting entity is submitting both positive and negative results. But you know, I'm pretty confident, as I'm sure Dr. Weinheim is, that Kootenai is doing the bulk of the testing.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. And I think that's fair. It is important to recognize that the testing has spread out a little bit with the implementation of testing at Heritage Health. Kootenai was doing probably 95% of the testing locally, and that's been spread out a little bit. So it is. I'm not surprised either to see the difference. And I don't know, Jeff, that that latest statistic and when that's reported from, but I think ours has been fairly consistent from a 7-day rolling average standpoint, and it is just a different number, and it is mostly local. So I think folks that were coming from Shoshone or from Bonner counties before are probably getting tested closer to home now, because that testing is now available. So this probably is a reflection of our patients that are more sort of in Kootenai County. I don't have an exact number of zip codes. We actually do keep a heat map of all of our patient testing. I could show it to you, but it wouldn't be easy to interpret. But that's just a reflection about kind of, I think, what we're seeing here at Kootenai Health.
So, John, I just want to clarify maybe 2 points there. So you gave a number of 8.2 and I think an uptick of 8.3 maybe since this morning. That's a 7-day rolling average, is that correct? Or is that
that's
the
correct?
Daily? Okay.
That's right.
And then that number, that's just a percentage of all tests that you guys are doing regardless of county of residence?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So, and for full transparency, not to confound the group, but we have had one more patient admission for COVID today since we got on the phone. So now we're at 21 patients in the hospital.
I'll go ahead and speak, I guess, just where I'm at. I think, the numbers we've heard today, kind of the updated stuff today, it is alarming. And for me, maybe it's a reason to quit pause. I also know that 1 day worth of data isn't a trend, right? And in that we purposely said we're going to look at data over a period of weeks so that we're not going to react week to week or day to day on, okay, now we're yellow, now we're green, now we're red, jump all over, right? We want to look at a period of data. And so why I'm alarmed by them, I don't know. I'm also alarmed that with flu season coming around, we may not get a chance to go to yellow if we continue to wait and wait and wait, and that we could just be in orange forever. And, I think we need to, being in school is important for these kids. I think our parents want it, our community wants it, our students want it, our teachers want it, and I would still be supportive of moving to yellow at this time based on the trend of the data and the data over the last couple of weeks. I think, we made a decision on August 17th for planning purposes, but had we waited days or a week, we may not have opened in orange. And I don't begrudge that decision at all. I think it was an appropriate decision for our district. I think it's worked well, but I also support moving to 5 days a week. So, and that's where I'm at.
I'll weigh in since I haven't weighed in on that. I think for me, I came in here with a different understanding of the data, and we have received new information since we've been sitting here for almost an hour. And I think what concerns me is we put out these metrics, we approve these metrics as a board, and the community is familiar with them. And I have discomfort about making a change if 2 of the 3 metrics are squarely in orange now. And one of them is a 7-day rolling trend, so it is more accurate than a 1-day snapshot. We know hospital numbers, while the inpatients have gone up recently, the critical care numbers don't move rapidly, and so it's possible that we may see 7 in the ICU for days. Those patients tend to linger there a little bit longer, and so it worries me that if we're making this big change, that we're going to end up squarely in orange in a week or 2 weeks and have to pivot back. And after seeing all of the hard work that our staff has done to prepare our schools, I walked around with an assurance that our students looked safe. They were socially distanced, they were wearing masks, they were learning, the staff felt comfortable. We heard that over and over again, and I guess I would ask that we give it 1 more week. We see if this is just a trend or a 1-day snapshot, and we hit pause for 7 days. We have weekly meetings scheduled. And we can see where we are in a week. But if we make this change in 6 days from now, I think we could have some community members frustrated that we put this opening framework and these metrics out there and now we're not following them. And I would worry.
Trustee May, I hear what you're saying, and I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying. But I guess I feel it's that important that we get the 5 days. I would say in regards to critical care, that's, since we've been tracking it, that's the one that jumps around the most, right? And maybe is the least correlated to our operations. I think most of the guidance has been, and the information out there is that incident rate is the most important, followed by positivity rate, or depending who you talk, they may flip those two, with the hospitalizations kind of being a secondary consideration.
And I would just like to clarify, I care as equally about getting kids back in school 5 days a week. There's not one person sitting up here who isn't worried every day about our students not getting instructional learning and the burden that this is placing on our community, and it weighs heavy on my heart every single day. So I really want to clarify that this is not about not wanting students back in class 5 days a week. It's about student and staff safety and ultimately safety for our community.
Yeah, certainly I understand that and didn't mean to imply that. Okay, other comments?
I have another question. John, your name is up there, so that's actually who I intended my question for. I guess I'm confused, and I don't know that you see the data that I do, but I have in my packet information that said September 3rd from Kootenai Health was at 6.2 positivity, September 10th, 6.2 positivity, September 17th, 6.4 positivity. But I hear you just indicating a 7-day rolling of 8.2. And so I just don't, did we have the wrong numbers? I don't understand how on September 17th, which was just last Thursday, we're getting information of 6.4%, but you're saying a rolling day average is 8.2. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, so the short answer is I'd have to look at the data. We track from a dashboard standpoint just the numbers that we have inputted from an overall testing versus number of positives. And so the data you had from last week, was accurate at the time. And right now, like I said, since we started the conversation this morning, we've had even another slight uptick from a 7-day rolling average standpoint. So I think, as Elizabeth sort of pointed out, we have seen, and again, there's sort of three things that kind of go together here. We've seen an uptick slightly in 7-day rolling average, an uptick in the number of hospitalizations and the number of tests that have been ordered as well. So nothing that indicates sort of dramatic shifts, but certainly every one of those endpoints has increased in the last few weeks. So.
Okay, thank you.
Bet.
So that I'm clear, today then, when the metrics are all updated, since it's been a week, on number 2 for the testing positivity rate, it's going to say 8.3. That number is going to go out to the community. That on number 2 within our metrics dashboard, that's what it's going to say.
We've actually been reporting these as a 7-day rolling average once a week, and that we report those, as you can tell, on the Thursday of the week. And so we wouldn't necessarily report this tomorrow. We would
Thursday.
report it on Thursday, correct?
Okay, sorry, my bad.
So I kind of want to respond to what you said, Casey, a little bit with the trend. And while we have trended in yellow, I still struggle because what I see in terms of the positivity rate is an increase still while we're in yellow, though, but the trend has been to increase, and now 2% in 1 week, arguably, but certainly, you know, a static of 1 week and then a 0.2 increase, and then and now a 2% increase. And then I look at hospitalizations, and the trend in the last, what day, we're 20th, so since for 2 weeks, hasn't been 100% increase, but certainly the last week has been nothing but incremental increases from 10 to 11 to 15 to 21. We did have a small reduction in a 2-day gap from critical care, but now they had a spike of 3. And so if I'm looking at trending, even though we've trended within the yellow, we've trended up within the yellow, which has put us on the bubble. And I feel like if I'm just being really prudent and responsible and trying to make sure that we aren't going to open the floodgates, I feel like I'm headed in the orange direction and keeping us where we're at. I hate to say that. I have 100% anticipated walking in today, believing we were in yellow and believing that we were going to be having kids in 5 days and expecting that. But I just can't make a decision today that says we're going to look at trending up for either days or weeks, having information that puts us into orange, and then saying, okay, we're just going to put them all together and see what happens. I can't say that's prudent in my opinion right now, but I'm so willing to talk about it. This sucks. Let me just say that. I'm just going to put on the record, this sucks.
I'm willing to talk about it as well, but I'm definitely leaning towards orange, given our information today, and that we've been trending up in yellow, and given our feedback from community members, being in the school buildings, listening to staff, and so I'm open to discussing it as well, but and maybe we look at a timeline where we set, because I hear that as well. Like, you know, we did commit to this for 2 weeks of orange. We're just starting. We've only had 1 week of orange. We've had 1 week of our kids in the buildings. This is starting our second week. So I'd like us to, if that is where we're headed, maybe we can, you know, we're 4 more weeks in orange, or I'm not sure that we can do that or say that, but something that we could have more than, I mean, just look at the change just from our numbers in our packet to today. And then given the fact that we have just been in school for 1 week, what is it going to look like when we're in school again for a second week with half of our students in the building? But I too came in here thinking yellow, and now I'm not 100% sure that having, you know, that we should be doing that given our uptick, and that we're trending up. So I'm open for discussion as well.
One of the things that I wonder if we need to have discussion about is that all plans, no matter if they're school district plans or plans throughout the country, they've changed since the beginning of COVID, and they roll out. I'm wondering if part of our plan we need to come back to and revisit. The students that give me the most heartache right now are K through third students, those that are home potentially alone, that cannot access, you know, online learning as much as possible. And so I wonder if we need to, at some point, quickly revisit what would it look like to bring maybe our younger students back, even before some of the older students, and retake a look at our plan. It wouldn't be unheard of to be able to do that. Given what we've heard today in the data, I'd have a hard time full-heartedly saying 5 days a week starting next Monday. And so I do think we need to pause and revisit again quickly, but I also would entertain the thought to come back and revisit what would it look like to get our youngest kids back in school first, and could that be helpful to families that are really struggling right now, and that especially need us back in school full time. All of our students need that, but I think especially those youngest kids.
I think from a class size standpoint, certainly our elementaries appear to be most well positioned, right? It's the lowest numbers in the 6 years I've been on the board. It is the lowest class size average that I can recall. So it's an easier obstacle to overcome what Miss May was talking about earlier with some of those large classes. Not that there may be a pocket here or there where you have a large class. But,
I agree that, getting our K-5 students back in class as soon as we can has got to be a priority. I think nationally and internationally, schools have been most successful at getting the younger kids back. We're still debating transmission, but we do have the space. And so as we continue to discuss this weekly, whatever direction we head, if we don't get students back in the class today, I would like us to discuss getting our youngest as soon as possible because we have more space and we can socially distance easier, getting them back sooner rather than later.
Well, our K-3 numbers, I think, are a little different than the others, because I do know that we have some fifth grade classes that are 30 plus. Am I correct in saying that?
I don't think we have any in the 30s, but we are a little bigger in fourth and fifth grade. But I think right now, the last we checked, our average class size K-5, if you ran it across all of them, was a little over 22. And we typically run in the 26 or 27 range. So, but that's K-5, that's every class size. If we have a 30, I'd be at the fifth grade. I think it would be just one or very few of them.
And so right now, a lot of those classes that do breakfast and lunch, they're taking their kids down to get their breakfast, taking them back to have breakfast in the classroom, taking care of that, and then lunch rolls around again. And so we've got to think about that as well when we're looking at that, which is something that I just in conversations that I've heard is, something that we put in place to help keep cohort and, which is great. But I think then when you're adding all of them, what that then looks like.
So I would just remind the board that currently there's not a process in place now that exists that would be bringing back chunks of kids in some grade level group separately under a different model, like a yellow or an orange or something. And so if that's something that this board is interested in, that we should collectively agree upon that and then allow some time to develop what that would look like, because that is a substantial investment of energy and time and would take some effort on our part to build something like that. It's not just something that we could just throw into place if we were to vote to do something like that for next week. This plan is currently built for the whole thing to come into yellow, for the whole thing to come into orange, and so I would just ask some grace there.
Understood. And I would just remind us, we are not noticed to take action on the plan itself, so it wouldn't be appropriate for us to do so. And really, we probably need to be careful with the discussion. If it's something we want to talk about in the future, then let's note that, and perhaps we can. We have meetings scheduled for every Monday. Okay. All right. We'll, couple things. So we were noticed, at least on our side, I guess we weren't noticed, but we've tried to set these meetings at around an hour, and I'd like to try to honor that so we can get our things to our other activities that are in our schedules. What I am hearing is I may be the only one who'd be comfortable with moving to yellow today, and I understand reluctance to not do so. To do that, if we want to go to yellow, we'd need a motion, and I can't make a motion as board chair. So I think I'll ask a couple things. I'm going to ask if there's a motion to change category. Okay, there is no motion. So let's talk about next plans or when we want to review. Ms. Pickford mentioned kind of an extended period there. I'm not sure I'd be comfortable with that. I'd like to do this weekly, because to me, I think we need to find a window where we can get to yellow. Ms. Brumley reminded me that we don't currently have a meeting scheduled for next week because she was not available, I believe, next Monday. So we can try to find, if we want to do this weekly, an alternative time next week that would work with Ms. Brumley's schedule. Let's see.
Well, it's extremely difficult. It wouldn't be an
Mike.
11:30 block. We'd have to do something in the evening next week. But I'm just out of town and traveling on Monday, which makes it really difficult to even call in because I don't know cell-wise. I'm sorry. I'm out of town and traveling, and so even cell service and attempting to participate on Monday would make it really difficult. I'm traveling like 6 hours on the road and then on a plane in the mountains. So, but the rest of my week is extremely busy in the day. But evenings, certainly, we could do something on Tuesday at 5.
Dr. Cook, before we continue this discussion, can you just kind of go over with us again the plan, if the board takes action and we move to a different level, what it looks like from there? And, we talked about kind of some lead up time. Just refresh us on all of that again.
My apologies. So if you recall, we added a document in the reopening plan that clearly articulates the steps both for families and for students and staff, what it looks like when we transition. And we've got it down to about as tightly as you can turn this around. It takes 1 week. And so if we would have voted today to go to yellow or any other category for that matter, we would then plan on and communicate that transition would take place over the following week, and we would open up in the following Monday as whatever the new category decision might be. And we would look to make that a consistent transition approach, whatever it would happen. And then we would also ask for a kind of a tendency to linger in that category for some time. There's some challenges with changing too much, changing too often, changing too quickly. And so what we would ask is that we kind of spend some time, and by time we mean a good 3 to 4 weeks in some category with, and we recognize that that's an ask, that's not a demand, of course, but the idea would be is the longer that we could get kids in some kind of a semblance of a routine and staff. And when we, it doesn't sound like much to go from orange to yellow, but there's a lot of logistical things that we would have to change, and we would be doing that whether we're going from yellow to orange or orange to yellow. And so we would hope that one of the things that we would ask is a pretty explicit, like, let's set a date and then let's communicate that with our families so they would know what to expect when this conversation will be coming back up, so that if and when that decision was going to be contemplated by the board, that we would be able to communicate that well to our families so people would know that we're staying in this category or switching, so that they can start to plan around that accordingly.
Yeah, thank you for that input, because I think this is difficult for families and planning childcare and resources. It is extremely difficult, and I want the community to know we recognize that. And so thank you for reiterating that and reminding us all of how the process works.
We are scheduled to meet on October 5th for a regular board meeting. Would that be? I mean, we committed to this 2 weeks, so then that just puts us not getting to meet next week, but then on October 5th. I don't know if we could add that in.
Oh, we certainly could add that to the October 5th meeting. Personally, I'd like to see us meet on it next week, because we don't know, is this a blip or is this a trend? So I think a week we would have a better idea on that. And hopefully it's a blip and we can look to move.
So possibly Tuesday, you said, in the evening?
There's no time Monday. I think Monday's a consistent, it's start of the week for our families. Then it cuts it to 6 days that we'd be making a transition, which I think is tough.
Or what about Friday of this week?
I don't think Friday's enough time. We don't have the weekend data yet. I think I don't think it's a fair representation yet.
I mean, we update our data on Thursday. That's why I was saying it. Of course, here we had new data, right? But
I would just remind you that there's an ISBA regional meeting next Tuesday evening for chairs and vice chairs that could be potentially conflicting.
well, why don't we look at a time? I'll work with Miss Town and we'll see if we can find a time next week that will work. Knowing that if it's, a Tuesday as opposed to Monday, we may be giving a little shorter notice if we do have a change. I think we would, regardless of when we make decisions, we probably want them to start on Mondays. We're not going to change from orange to yellow or vice versa on a midweek. So I'll work with Miss Town and get some proposed dates out to you as soon as we have those. Of course, we will communicate those out to the public. Sound fair? Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks to the folks who were on to provide information on Zoom from Kootenai and Panhandle Health.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks.